Well, let's just talk about. I think the first thing that might be fun to know is just how did you decide that you were going to go to Spain? What was that all about?
Yeah. It's funny always to talk about anything in the past because you construct the whole narrative around it, right? And I think you can never be quite sure, like, what was the initial impetus, but it really could be as simple as my close friend Ethan. We were planning to maybe go and do a backpacking trip in the summer. I was like, yo, count me in if you're going to do that because I used to be in Boy Scouts and I just love the outdoors, but it's rare that I get the opportunity to do it. And so we were thinking maybe we'd do part of the Appalachian Trail in the summer. And I remember we were going climbing one day, and he just said, "Hey man, I don't know. I'm actually thinking I might go to Spain this summer instead." And I still remember my initial thought for that whole night was like, that would be completely impossible. Like I could never do that. That's just absurd. Like where's the money gonna come from? Like I have cats. Like I have a business I'm trying to start. So it occurred for me like impossible, right?
Yeah.
And where I was in my phase in that life, I was in something called the Introduction Leaders Program, which really had me in a space of thinking of just fulfilling on things that I might think are actually impossible, but are really deeply rooted in who I am. So the fact that I saw it as impossible was what made me want to do it. By the next day, I went from like impossible to like that sounds amazing. So yeah, I really just seized it from there because if I took a step back, I could see that it was totally possible. I was like, well, I have these savings, and I could start to see how it would all work and how it would be such a powerful thing that I could do because if you knew me like in high school, I would always be like, man, I need to go somewhere else. I'm so sick of this American culture. That's all I know. I want to see something greater. I want to see what is it like other places. And I remember this angst that I have. I was like, there's no way I'm going to get to. I'm going to be I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm going to be old before I get to do that. I'm going to be like 30. And it's funny that I was kind of right, but now that I'm now that I'm past 30, I don't actually think it's old. So,
That's really cool, man.
yeah.
Yeah, so you were in a space in life where you were, kind of seeing how you can really make things happen when you decide to do it. And yeah, and the connection of the friendship that you have with Ethan, who everyone probably got to see a bit of Ethan in those videos. It's really cool how community, whether it's one friend or multiple friends, plus a decision can make something as spectacular as that happen in your life.
Mm.
That's so cool. So fast forward with me and tell me about what it was like, preparing. And obviously, you went with an interesting outcome in mind. So tell me about that, the prep work for that, how you came to the decision that you were going to, document the trip in the way that you do. And yeah, just let us in on that.
Sure. Yeah. That's a really good line of inquiry, actually. So it's quite funny because what you would think that you should do if you're going to prepare for a trip like this would be you're going to get everything that you need to pack because you just have a backpack, right? That means on the plane too. Everything has to fit in a backpack, and this needs to sustain you for 4 or 5 weeks. So you need to be focusing on what you're packing. And then if you were a little wiser than me, you would be doing a lot of walking and hiking to build up your endurance. But I was very overconfident because I'm like, well, I climb, I rock climb. That's pretty intense. I do that twice a week. And I felt like, hey, I walk around all the time. So I didn't really prepare adequately, I wouldn't say, on the physical side. So to address your question before I ramble on, I had my sights set on being a documentarian of this trip. And some of you might have seen the camping video that's on my channel. That was the first time I really filmed a vlog, and it was just with an iPhone. And I just filmed short clips and put it together, and it was so fun. And that sparked the idea. I was like, if I go to Spain, what if I get a drone and I like learn to do that? Imagine what I could document. And so my focus was really on that, and I did. I got a drone, and I think the end of April, and then I was just flying it every single day. And I remember like specifically one time I went climbing and I had the drone with me, and the climbing gym is right by a huge hill that goes up over the interstate and has this just like expansive, beautiful view. And I remember just flying the drone up and then flying it out way over the highway, way like up, 300-400 feet high. And my hands were literally like shaking from, I guess, adrenaline and just how intense it was. So it was fun going through that process of being like, wow, this is the craziest. I guess it felt like this is the craziest video game I've ever played, right? Because it's like real life, but it felt like a video game because you have a controller. And so, yeah, that was the biggest preparation that I did was just honing my drone skills. And I actually took a drone course as well to learn from a pro, like how should I actually get good shots, what should my settings be, what kind of like lens filters do I need, and then in post, like how should I be editing, how should I be color grading. And I practiced that on a video that I made of all that downtown Nashville footage. And really the purpose of all of that was to be able to document things in Spain.
That's cool. And so, what was your excitement level once you decided you were going to Spain with Ethan and you started on this journey of, okay, I'm going to pack a drone. I'm going to bring, some things so that I can be a documentary on, like, have that role as part of this discovery of, an adventure. And I don't know if this is common knowledge, but I'm guessing we're getting more footage than just Barcelona
Oh
because
yeah.
you're talking about walking a lot that you weren't prepared for necessarily.
Yeah. So I forget that people don't know the story. So for those that don't know, I was over there for 5 weeks. I would say around 4 weeks of that was hardcore backpacking. Now, it's not as hardcore as the Appalachian Trail because you're not camping. Ironically, I think for me that's actually better because I was staying in, at least for the beginning, in shared dormitories where there's a lot of people and it's very noisy and I'm a light sleeper, so I was getting fairly poor sleep. I don't want to spoil too much about the story because you'll see it as it unfolds, but I can just say that it was a lot more difficult than I expected, and I really didn't slack on the documenting. Like no matter how I was feeling or how little sleep I got and all of that, it was like my fixation of just what footage can I get? What footage can I get? Even when I lost my darkening filters, so I couldn't have the right settings for the drone anymore to make it look cinematic and super pro. You're walking sometimes the more intense days, I would say 10 hours, straight up 10 hours walking at a fast clip. And then you're so tired whenever you're done. And I should mention that my pack was, I'm not exaggerating, at least 3 times heavier than the average pack. Like I only checked later after I had been hiking for several weeks, like what is the recommended weight? And it's supposed to be like 10% of your body weight. And mine was like 50, 60 pounds, something like that. So yeah.
Hardcore
Oh
mode. I
my
love
God.
it.
It's
That's amazing.
hilarious how overconfident I was and how my mindset, well, I was like, if it's heavy, like I'll just literally get stronger. So it's a win-win, right? It's like, it's hilarious how little I really knew, but yeah, I don't know. I just jumped into it. So
That's cool, man. Yeah, and tell me about, obviously Barcelona is beautiful, and there's a lot of amazing art and culture there. Tell me about your experience there that maybe we didn't get to see in the video. What's
yeah,
it really like?
for sure. So one of the things that surprised me was that I'm going to Spain, so I'm expecting, hey, I speak Spanish. This is going to be incredible. Like I get to practice my Spanish and have conversation. And then you fly into Barcelona and you're like, oh, I'm in Catalonia. What does that mean? There's Catalan, which is a different language from Spanish. Now, my understanding is that most of the population does still speak Spanish, but there's a historical language, Catalan, that it kind of looks like it has some relation to French. I'm not sure all because there's Basque, there's Catalan, there's Basque, then there's other languages aside from Spanish that are there between Spain and France, and I'm not educated on
Wow.
all that.
So you weren't
So
expecting that.
no, so I get there and like all of the signs, I'm like, oh heck yeah, all the signs are gonna be in Spanish. No, they're usually in Catalan. And so instead of playa for beach, it's I don't know how to pronounce it, but platja, like Platja. And so I'm like, whoa, this is weird. And I purposely didn't research anything about any of the cities we were going to because I wanted to just be surprised. And so I think something that might not be captured in that video is how, to me, unique the feeling of being in Barcelona is, because it's this massive place, and for like hundreds of years it's had some cultural significance, but some of the times when you're in the city it literally feels like a tiny city. Like, it feels not empty in a bad way like a ghost town, but it just feels like chill. You're just walking around, it's not crowded, and it doesn't have like a New York or Chicago city feeling where people are like stressed and going really quickly and stuff. It has
Cool.
this carefree kind of feeling to it.
That's really cool. So if you could sum up your experience there in Barcelona, what would be like one of the most surprising things, other than the language being not what you were expecting and just the sense of relaxed environment, you know?
What
Is there
else?
anything else? Yeah, is there anything else?
Hmm. I guess just how much amazing architecture was going to actually be there.
Cool. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I would say probably the most iconic building that's in Barcelona is the Sagrada Familia, which is, when it's fully completed, going to be I believe, the largest Catholic cathedral in the world. And it's been under construction since the late 1800s. So,
Wow.
I mean, it kind of steals the show in a sense. And the main architect was Anthony Gaudi, who kind of devoted his whole life to the Sagrada Familia. And he was very famous and kind of a patron artist, architect of that city. And so I didn't realize there would be a bunch of other amazing things that he created, like Park Güell, which y'all will get to see in the second Barcelona vlog.
Woo.
It's this big, expansive, odd, I don't even know how to explain it, park that's built with like rough stones that it seems like it was made to look antiquated and asymmetric. But then there's like these really cool, there's like this whole room where it's just a room of pillars. It's
Hmm.
just, and everywhere you look, it's just pillars. And then on top of there's this huge platform with these like snaking handrails that have mosaics over everything. And it's just, you can
Wow.
overlook the whole city from there. There was other weird houses he built, but then there would be other, he was more modernist art and modernist architecture. And so it's very experimental and different. But then there's like the Catedral de Barcelona, the Barcelona Cathedral that's there. And then there's all these other buildings. I guess the way I'd say it is, imagine some of the famous buildings that might be in an American town, like the most famous one. And then imagine a city where there's like 50 of those. So they're like, oh yeah, that's just that old thing. Oh yeah, that was built in the 1300s. It's no big deal.
Yeah, that's really cool. One of my mentors tells a story about going to Italy and how she was, they're going to like through the streets, and they're getting this tour guide, and the tour guide's like, "Yes, this is the newer church. It was built in 19, or 18 something, right?" And my mentor's like, "The newer church. Where's the old church at?" She's like, "Oh, it's across the street. It was built, 500 years before or something crazy."
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, it's really interesting how the history makes a difference. And I don't want to deviate too much, but it just makes me interested in, the relaxed vibe that you got when you were there.
Yeah.
It's like here we're go go go. Other places of the world might have a different culture altogether in terms of just how fast paced their society is. And I just
Yeah.
think it's interesting, how the history of a place kind of influences the people and what the quality of life is and what people expect, to do with their life.
Yeah, it's kind of a fascinating question to look at. And like we say, hey, the city had a certain kind of vibe, but what is that vibe? What is it really produced by? And my question is, how much of this is psychological, right? So we have a stereotype in our mind of Europe, and me and Ethan kept joking being in Barcelona and just saying like literally everything we'd see, we'd be like, if you imagined what Europe would look like, that's exactly what it would look like. So it has a sense of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or I guess you've had experience being in Europe, so how much do you think is psychological? How much do you think in your own psyche you're over exaggerating, like, wow, there's so much history? And how much do you
Yeah.
think is authentically there outside of something psychological? Or do you think that the two are like intertwined anyway?
It's a really awesome question. I think you're right in a lot of respects. Whatever you build it up to be in your mind, it will be a prophecy that's fulfilled. You get to go and you get to see these things that are older than, like, a building that's older than an entire country. You
Mm.
know, like, there's a certain coolness factor to that. Whereas everything over here is can't be any older. Like, there's no possible way, right? Other than some, like, burial grounds and other cool things that are really ancient. Yeah, I think it's what you put into it, it's what you get out of it. So there's a bit of the Paris, the city of love, expecting it to be this very romantic town, and all these amazing things that they're going to do and see. And when they get there, they see how nasty and dirty it is, and all of that. And it's kind of it's not it doesn't really live up to what they built it up to be in their head. So
Mm.
yeah, I think when a place can actually hold and allow you to experience what you built it up in your head, there's a certain, I guess you could say, magic to that. Like, there's a certain cool factor. I expected to go to Europe and experience this really cool thing, and it actually was really cool.
Mm.
It speaks to the integrity of the people, and maybe some of that history makes an impact somehow in there.
Yeah, like it has to, because once I learned later, and I still know very little, but I learned from going to the Museo de Art de Catalunya, the Catalonian art museum that's in Barcelona. That's in a massive palace, by the way. I'm like, of course,
Wow.
this art museum's in an enormous palace with all this majestic stuff outside, and this enormous fountain that is like apparently a light show at night in summer that I didn't get to see. Anyway,
Oh,
till I get off my train of thought, I kind of found out that Barcelona was a huge cultural hotspot during the late 1800s into the early 1900s with the modernism movement. I think you can kind of feel that. I really feel like that contributes to that vibe that's in that city, is like all of these artists and musicians and craftsmen, both from the past and then continuing that lineage. Because I can think of other cities that I went to that were not even as big as Barcelona, that had a very tense, like, city type feeling to it. Like, one I can keep in mind is like Logroño. That was one of the big cities that we walked through, and it was so different, you know. Um,
yeah,
mhm.
that's cool. That's really, really cool. What an interesting conversation. That wasn't planned at all.
No, it wasn't.
Cool. Um, okay, so we've got, just the vibe of the city was really cool. The language was an interesting, unexpected surprise. And there's this sense of history, there's this sense of architecture and art that was really impressive to you. I gotta ask, how was the food?
It was good in Barcelona. It was good.
Cool.
I had seafood paella the first day I went there because you kind of have to, right? It was really really good.
What is that?
So it's a rice dish that has different seafood in it. Fish. What does it have? Like, it has different things depending on who makes it, but I think it has like clams, fish, um, mussels, scallops. It can have different stuff like that, and then it has fish and some or rice and some different vegetables and some spices, and it's cooked in a very specific type of a pan, like a shallow pan, and then they serve it to you in that. And
Oh, that's cool.
it's a coast city, so the seafood is extremely fresh.
That's really cool.
Um, but yeah, I did have some issues with some of the Spanish cuisine in some of the smaller towns. I found it. I mean, it was just pure like bread and meat, like, and the meat is just like all pork. It's just
Interesting.
like different types of cured porks, like, which are good, but I always found the food quite good in the larger cities. It's always funny as an American to go, and there's like I was looking in some of the footage, I think screenshots today. Oh yeah, it's the Sagrada Familia, and if you look close down to the side, you see Five Guys. So it's like, wow. And I
Popular
remember
restaurant
walking
here in
by,
the city.
like, on the strip near the beach, near the really touristy part of Barcelona. There would be like McDonald's, KFC, and stuff.
Of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. Well, let's bring it back. Let's bring the conversation back. I want to know, just what it was like when you were first getting started, right? Getting acclimated to being on a different time zone, right? Waking up in a new city, and capturing all of this amazing footage as you have. What was that experience like? How did your time go in the day whenever you were doing this? Did it go by fast? Did it feel like, oh my gosh, I got to find the right place, or was it just like, okay, this is a cool spot. Let's get some footage here. Can you tell us just a little bit about that whole experience?
I would describe it, if I summed it up, as extreme time dilation. Like every day felt like a week. It was so wild because in Spain, the sun sets near 10 p.m. And so it's not getting fully dark until close to 11 oftentimes. And we were
Wow.
waking up early. For the first week, 10 days, I was getting very poor sleep, which is not ideal, obviously. But
Right.
like the second vlog in Barcelona, it has sunrise footage. I was awake by 5 a.m. and I probably didn't go to sleep that night until maybe 11, because that was when it was finally getting dark. It's like, okay, it's dark, so I can go to sleep. And in a lot of the albergues, they would have an enforced leaving time. So, and an enforced going to bed time. Not going to bed, but being in the albergue. It's like our doors close at 10 p.m. Or whatever, and then you have to be out of here by 8 a.m. or 7 or 9 or something. So it was very surreal in the sense. It was like extreme time dilation. Yeah.
Got it. If you were to do it again, would there be anything that you would do to prepare, just for that time dilation aspect? Just curious.
Um.
Is there anything you could do?
Right.
So, I mean, jet lag is a real thing. Moving
Yeah.
forward, was it six hours time zone by the time
Yeah. I
zone?
can't remember.
Okay.
Something like that. Yeah. Something around that. I don't know if there was much that I would do to prepare for that, for the time aspect of it. Maybe I would. I don't know, because actually I would say that that time dilation as a whole was a very positive experience. And I think it was
Okay.
kind of created by the fact that a lot of the things that I'm doing in my day-to-day life when I'm not traveling is it's quite repetitive and it involves a lot of technology, sitting in front of screens, and so time has a kind of habit built in that makes things kind of just.
Yeah.
But I felt like that actually did occur in Spain as well after a while. Like I think you get into a middle part of the trip where you're in this nebulous zone. You're like, I've been walking every day for so long. Like I don't even know how I perceive time anymore. But then that time dilation would come back on the days that I did the longest walks, the ones where I was walking about 10 hours in the day. So eventually it did kind of even out where it started to feel like there's this section of the Camino Frances in the Meseta, which is like a little plateau. It's the flatter part. There's a section of it where for maybe about 5+ days, it almost things look very similar. And so you kind of feel like that 9 to 5 feeling of like, okay, I'm gonna wake up,
Wake up,
I'm gonna walk on
walk.
this flat thing that's like a path, and these trees are by the side of it. And then I'm gonna go through these towns, and then I'm gonna get to the place, and I'm gonna sleep, and then do it again. But
Very cool.
yeah,
Yeah, I love that. And I've just got maybe one or two more questions, if that's okay.
cool. Yeah, absolutely.
So, if you were to give anyone any pointers in, planning and executing a trip like this, let's just keep it within the scope of, this amazing city, Barcelona,
Hmm.
right? If someone wanted to go somewhere and just experience the city for, a week or a few days that they'd never been to before, what are some of the things that you learned about the, planning of that, the actual, like, when you're there, how time goes,
Hmm.
intention behind it? Is there anything you would offer?
Yeah, I could give some pointers of things that I didn't do that I think if I had done them would have set me up in a more powerful way to actually engage with the place. So one thing might be just do some free writing about the place you're going. And I'm not even saying go do a bunch of research so you can prove how much you know about it. Just open a document or write it by hand. Why do you want to go to that city? Like what is the meaning of it for you? And just get clear on that aspect of what's really driving you. Because when you go to one of these places, I mean, it's so overwhelming. Like, I ended up spending probably a total of 8 days in Barcelona because I had complications where I couldn't leave the country. And I I wasn't even close to seeing what there is to see. I mean, you could live there for a year and you wouldn't see what there is to see. So I would say just getting clear, like what is it that pulls you in? Because I wouldn't actually recommend just opening. I mean, I did this as well for reference to open like a list of the 10 must see places
Hmm.
because not all of those places may really be that impactful for you. So
Yeah,
especially
that's
if it
good.
was in the context of what you asked of if you were going to go document it, then I would niche it down to what pulls you. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, and I get the sense from what you were sharing there that you went with this approach of like, eyes wide open, you know. Let's see what things I get to notice, Let's see what surprises there are. Seems like you also kind of knew some of the main things that you wanted to go see, right? So it's kind of like this kind of like don't be so rigorous with the schedule. Plan everything out before you get there. Just allow some time, in between the big events where you can just walk down a side street and just explore a bit more. I think there's a lot of fun in that, a lot of freedom in that.
Yeah. And another thing I would put in there is if you're planning on doing something like this, if you speak an adequate amount of the local language, it's a huge plus because you'll be able to find the places that are like the hidden gems, right? So you
Mm.
have all the huge tourist spots, and then you have hidden gems that are just amazing places that usually only the locals know about.
Did you get to see any of those by chance?
I did, but it wasn't through talking to the locals. I just stumbled upon it. But there's a spoiler about how I ended up in that place, but I was doing
Okay.
something urgent that I had to take care of at the very end of my trip, and I had to wait there and come back. So I was like, well, let me just walk around, and I found this wild nature preserve that just was on the in the city, and then it went to the out of the city, like basically it just
Mm.
went up into the hills or the mountains that were surrounding the whole city, and you could just like
Wow, that's cool.
hike up through this arid semi-desert thing with all these cactuses and stuff and end up at this route where there was no tourists. It seemed like it was just local bikers that were biking up at the top, and it was really
Wow.
strenuous and kind of dangerous to to get up there, but I had this feeling of like, oh yes, I found a treasure. Like I found something precious, right?
That's
So
beautiful.
yeah.
Cool. Well, I got one more question. One more question for you. If you, well, let me just ask it this way. What did you learn about you in the process of this journey that we've been able to experience so far that you've taken us on with you? What did you learn
Hmm.
from this first video, about you during that time? Is there anything in particular that comes to mind?
During the making of it, or during the filming of it, or
Yeah, during the making of it, during the
hmm.
filming of it, the experience of being there in person.
Yeah, I would say that it's something that could seem cliche when people say, "Oh, I had this dream and now I'm doing it and I can't believe it and oh my God, it's so incredible." But it really is like that. I think that we all underestimate what type of energy is released when we fulfill on something that we really genuinely want to do, especially if we think that it's not possible for us to do it. And then we show that. And so that opens up something where we're like, well, what else could be possible since I thought this was impossible and I'm doing it now? So from from going there, that's what I'd say I learned in Barcelona. If I said what I learned from the trip overall, it was really seeing that I was capable of a lot more than I thought. because the conditions were anything but perfect for the trip, but I made it through the whole thing, and I don't know, just surprised me the resilience that I actually had to deal with adverse situations that are far less than ideal. Yeah, and in the making of the video, it's interesting because it captures a lot of that, captures a lot of the experience, but it also creates something new. Yeah, and it's technology that we take for granted, right? It's like 10 years ago,
Very much so.
I couldn't have done that, and now I can kind of bring people along with me virtually. It's just like just being in awe of the simple things that we take for granted, seeing things with a new pair of eyes.
Wow, that's so cool. Well, thank you, Daniel, for taking us on this journey and for all the journeys we get to go on with you in the future, in the near future, and for just, your dedication, and um, your artistic flair. I really enjoy what you create always, and it's really cool to see the passion behind each of these projects. I really know that everything that you create, you put a part of yourself into it, and it really shines through in a way that's unique and really valuable, in my opinion, and I'm sure everyone else's opinion that's here. So
Wow.
just really appreciate this. It's a true gift, and yeah, thanks for letting me be here.
I got that acknowledgement. I really appreciate that, and I was highly impressed at your interviewing skills, man. This could be a I don't know. I don't know. Who knows what you could do with that?
Yeah, let's go.
It was great. I was like, wow, he's getting these questions from just it's fun to talk about this sort of thing, and yeah, it's the start of something that I don't even know. It's if you ever get the butterfly feeling in your stomach, sometimes that means you're on the track to something that's it's just greater than what you can imagine, and
Truly.
it can be a little bit intimidating at times and exhilarating. I think the two go together. So yeah, with that, I guess on that note, talking about the future adventures and creations,
Yeah.
I'm gonna just for everyone who stayed through this stream to our our musings and our conversations, I'm going to show you a 1 minute sneak peek, very exclusive sneak peek
Exclusive,
of
exclusive.
the next video that I'm gonna release next Friday. It's a nature video, autumn in Tennessee. Now,
Super excited.
let's make the technology work. So, Rusty, let's both mute. I'm going to show the sneak peek, and then I'm going to end the stream and say thank you so much for watching. I love you all, and have an amazing night. And thank you so much to you, Rusty, for showing up because I couldn't have done it without you.
Yeah. Super, super happy. I'm super excited about this, and thank you all.
Sweet.
Let's get into it,
Let's do
man.
it.